Hey, friend, fellow Obsidianer. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. Let me show you how to use Obsidian to begin to collect knowledge. So I'm going to give you a simple framework for what we're going to use, which has to do with we're going to capture information. Um, then we're going to organize it. And one of the things I love to do is sort of like then, review it. That's the linking part is kind of fun. And then express it. Like, how do you put it out in the world? I think, Thiago Forte calls this his core principle. The idea is there's a loop and the main thing about the loop is that we, we can't sort and ideate at the same time. You've got to like get the stuff out first, then in a different mindset, that's when you to organize it. And the reason for that is one of them is when we're expanding into ideation, it's a very open process. And so it's like, get it all out. And so it tends to like open the funnel. But when we're organizing, we're closing the funnel, we're narrowing. And so our minds evolved in such a way that we can do one or the other of those things, but we don't do them simultaneously. So we want a tool that reflects the way our biology works. So step one is to just capture stuff. Like the most important thing when you have an idea, you see a thing, you grab a clip, whatever, Obsidian becomes your safe place to dump it. And where's the safe place to put it is in your daily note. So I am fascinated with psychology. There's so much to learn. So here's an example. I'm going to walk you through like part of my process. I'll get to some of the more sophisticated things. Here's the core of it. So I found this thing about cognitive dissonance. Okay. What on earth is that? Well, that's when you have two conflicting ideas and you're holding them at the same time. Like, I smoke, but I want to stop smoking, but I haven't quit yet. So your brain is struggling to resolve two conflicting beliefs. I think that's fascinating. So I went and did a little bit of research. I found the definition. What is it? And then one of the highlights from my books I put in here is from Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Her quote ended up in here. So boom, come across it. Super. What do? Boom, I dump it into my daily note and then I move on with my life. Now we're coming back later and I'm like, it's not really useful in my daily note. I actually want to create a standalone note for that because I have no immediate plans to do anything with psychology. I am not a psychologist and I don't play one on TV. So there's no role or area of my life where I'm going to be dealing with psychology. So I'm going to close those. To me, it's a resource. It's for something in the future. So I'm going to make a folder and I'm going to call it psychology. And I could put some token in front of it. I don't know why. And then I'm going to make one of those home notes, psychology. And that is going to be my base note. And it's sort of the, notes about things I think are interesting about psychology. And in truth, I have this folder full of psychological biases. There's over 100 of them, like little quirks we have about the way our minds work. But let's go back to deal with this. Turns out Obsidian has a plugin called Note Composer. It's super cool. So if you were to go open this up and go to Note Composer, you can take a chunk of text and extract it into its own standalone note. And in fact, you can even create you can merge notes into other notes so you can combine things that are related, or you can use a template. So I've set this up. Let's go take a look at the extracted note template. So I set a little thing and I've mentioned this a few times and I'll do a video specifically on this, but I set up what's called front matter. See how this is formatted differently than all the other text? This is information about my note. And if I go to display mode, it'll vanish, but in edit mode, it's available. And it says who authored it, me. When did I create this? When did I update it? What version of my template is it? And then I could put some tags in here. To me, this is just a note card. And then the discoverability comment, I'll come back to that, but it's sort of a comment about a comment. And when I show you data view, you'll see how I use that to make notes even more discoverable. The note title will get fleshed out here using These little things in double brackets are variables that get replaced. This will be what I rename it. This double bracket thing here allows me to link back to where this note originally came from. I like to have a simple overview. It's like an executive summary, like what's this about? So I can get a quick feel for it. So my comment gives me the first clue. Overview is like, here's my summary. Then there's all the good stuff. And then I often create connections back to the day that I made a note. It's just multiple ways to get to a note. So what does that look like in practice? So let's go back to open today's daily note. Here's this thing. I want to grab all of this stuff and I want to put it in its own note. So Control P, extract, and it says note composer, extract current selection. I hit that. I say, yep, go ahead and create a note on cognitive dissonance. Boom. Now in my daily note, I have a link to this file, which has now been created with the title of cognitive dissonance. It's tagged. It's linked back to the original note that it came from. Super cool. There's my information inside of my content. And I could add a little, I think, holding, two ideas in your head is painful. It's not two ideas, it's two conflicting, and it's not just ideas, it's beliefs. Okay? So, but here's the problem. It's in the wrong spot. So I need to move this, and I can move it by dragging it, or I can just move it to the resources. Still in the wrong spot. I want to get it into psychology. So let's drag it up there. Boom. I now have it in psychology. Here's what's interesting. The links still work. I don't have to update them. It's just automatically going to keep them linked together. And remember, I told you all this front matter stuff. If I type Control E or Command E and I go to display mode, you can tell by the little icon up in the corner, it's a pencil or it's a book. That information vanishes. So if you just want to read it and you don't want to be distracted with that detail. But what this allows me to do, like one of the most powerful things, is sometimes things are called by more than one thing. So you could say it's cognitive dissonance. You could also call it a bias. Okay. So let's call it a CD bias. Why does that matter? Well, if I'm writing a new document, I might decide that I'm looking for two open brackets, and now all the notes in my system start to become available. Look at this. Cognitive dissonance is there, but also its shortcut name. So I can link things by multiple names by using the alias. Later when I expose my whole system to you, that'll make a ton of sense. Because one of the problems you can run into is notes can have actually the same names. And there's a way of resolving that, and I'll get to that in a future video. But for right now, what have we done? Let's have a quick recap here. Is we captured some information into a daily note. Then we decided we wanted to put it in its own folder, create its own note for it. And so we used the note extractor plugin to do that. And in using the note extractor with a template, we now have our little definition archived and organized under a topic that makes sense for us. And here's where we'd really use it, is you might say files or notes about this topic. I can just put a hyphen there, double bracket, and say, select CD bias, boom. Now it's easier for me to go in and begin to create that top down of like, how are these things organized? I can put them in groups and create lists, and you get all of that useful information. So this is the beginning of linking our thinking. We're capturing information, usually dumping it in a daily note, then we can extract it into its own standalone file and then push it into the best folder to put it in. Had this been related to a project, it would have ended up in a project folder. Had it been related to an area in my life, it would have ended up in the appropriate area folder. This is something I'm curious about. It ended up in a resources folder under psychology. So I'm beginning to show you, or getting exposed to this method of how I now have a trusted source where I can dump information and then push it out into a folder structure that is actually useful because it's organized by time. Projects are now, areas are soon, and resources are things for the future, things I'm curious about.